Hey, I'm your dad in a Speedo, and after 554 days, the War Within has come to an end. In this video, I want to give my thoughts about this expansion and talk about how it compares to Dragonflight, an expansion I called one of the best ever in the review I did of it in 2024. Then I want to talk a little bit about Midnight and what I'm hoping for. I think Midnight could end up being my favorite expansion ever, so I'm hoping for something great. To start off, I just want to give some context to how much of the War Within that I played so you know where I'm coming from. I'll give more context as I talk about certain things throughout the video. I'm a casual player who logged in almost every single day. In this expansion, I got a total of 40 characters level 80, which includes the 12 remix characters I made, as well as the one boosted character from the Midnight pre-order. I primarily played 4 characters though, which were my Fury Warrior, my Marksman Hunter for PvP, my Prop Pally, and my Resto Shaman. Across these 4, I have 70 days played at level 80, and you could probably take at least a week of playtime out of that from just AFK farming stuff or waiting for queues to pop. So in my Dragonflight review video, I talked about how it was a casual-friendly expansion and it didn't feel like a job to play for the first time since maybe WoD. There was no grind, no anima, no azurites, no legendaries, no nothing that I needed to grind. And in the War Within, I wanted more of that. And I think for the most part, I got that, but it missed the mark in some places. You could still be a casual and have a good time in the War Within, but there was less content, which is fine, but the quality of the content was also not good. But what I want to start with is delves, because those are one of the big features in the War Within that came out. For myself, I did every achievement except for the one to do 1000, so I did about 650 delves this expansion, and I did tier 11s across all 3 roles. Subjectively, they're not the most interesting thing, but objectively, they're a great addition to the game. When they were announced, I was a little bit apprehensive because a lot of people were comparing them to Torghast, which I think is just a very weird comparison. It really put a bad taste in my mouth, and they're nothing like Torghast at all. Delves, I think, were a great addition to endgame because it gives you another way to gear up your main or any of your alts, fill out your vault, and it gives solo players a way to actually get decently geared without ever having to group up with anyone if you don't want to. You can just play at your own pace. But there were downsides because not every class or even every spec had the same experience. Bran was such a frustrating companion in these things. Ignoring the fact that his hitbox was like the entire delve, so whenever you were trying to click something, you just clicked on Bran. His aggro radius was also massive. Healing Bran in delves was a surefire way to make me want to log off as soon as I was done. He would pull a mob and then kite them into other mobs while kiting that back into more mobs. He refused to stand still, which as a shaman was gruelingly frustrating. And the fact that I had no control over where he went just made it so much worse. As a tank, this was just a very slow and not fun experience. Bran did so little DPS that I often would finish the delves having done 99% of all damage. I never did try DPS as any other class other than my warrior, but I heard that some classes had it a lot harder than others. But even as a warrior though, I would get frustrated because I always felt like after a certain point, a tier 11 should be easy. And I guess it was eventually easier because I could get through a tier 11 without having to pop all my offensives and just plan my defensive cooldowns. But I was still getting trucked by mobs. It was just so annoying losing 50% of my health from auto attacks when I was low geared, but then it was even more annoying when I was losing 50% of my health from those same auto attacks when I was decked out in mythic level gear. But from that negative, one thing I did like about delves was how every season they had a new theme. In season 1 we had Nerubians, season 2 had goblins, and season 3 was void stuff. It was a nice little touch that kept the themes of the expansion present in the things you were doing and more than just the new zone that came out that patch. The seasonal bosses were a great idea for the most part, I think. I only did Zekfir in season 1 on double question mark difficulty and the other 2 I only did on single question mark difficulty. I love the idea of a solo boss fight like that. It's very RPG and fun. I had a blast figuring out how Zekfir worked and slowly progressing through him. Underpin in season 2 though was absolutely the worst thing of the entire expansion, and it still gets me heated thinking about it now. It was so heavily dependent on RNG and had no forgiveness. You had to avoid like 4 different things all at the same time every 15 seconds for 10 minutes straight, and if you dared to get hit by one thing, you instantly died. They don't even make mythic raid bosses like that anymore, just straight up awful. Kaiveza in season 3, I'm not really sure about. I didn't spend too much time in double question mark difficulty to really know whether or not it was fun. I will say that the single question mark was a ton of fun though, and I enjoyed learning it. I just think the amount of memorization that was required for the shadows and how fast you had to remember in double question mark was just not for me. Overall, I would say that delves were a positive addition to the game, and Blizzard overall did a good job. At Midnight, I hope that gear matters a little bit more, and I'm not getting nearly one shot even though I'm fully geared. I'd love to see seasonal bosses come back, but more in line with Zekfir and Kaiveza, nothing like Underpin ever again in any aspect of this game. I think delves can really be a staple for the low to mid-range endgame content for all types of players, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they evolve this over the years. Going back to my Dragonflight review, I talked about all the events that we had. We had like a dozen different ones. And like I said earlier, the War Within had fewer events, which is fine, but the quality of the events was confusing. You had events like Awakening the Machine, which just felt incomplete and it bored me to tears. Challenge mode being introduced in Season 2, I think, was nice because it sped it up, but overall, it was just very lazy content. Like, what was the point of this? Who was this made for? It was irrelevant almost immediately. But then there's World Soul Memories, which are just something else that felt incomplete and lazy. It was super boring, even on the hard mode that existed. It was 5 minutes of running around an area that had very few mobs to begin with, trying to get a high score for killing as many mobs as you can. I did like the idea behind these though, because I like when systems work together in a sense. So you completed a delve to get an echo, you used that echo to do these memories, which gave you shards, which you use those shards to get keys so you can do more delves. I like that. That's a good idea. It's just that this content sucked. It was also really frustrating to see a bug that happened throughout the entirety of the expansion. I had this happen every single season where I would get a high score and get like 12 coffer shards. Like, it's one thing to spend 5 minutes doing uninspired content, it's another thing to get scammed out of the reward for doing it also. That's just insult to injury. Then there's events like Trash Piles and Undermine, which are just uninspired, unengaging, boring, lazy. Not everything needs to be the most dopamine-hitting experience ever, but my god, at least make it seem like it's not just some last-minute addition of the game. The events in Dragonflight really filled out each zone and always gave you something to do. They weren't all winners, but even events like the Big Dig or the Community Feast were far more fleshed out and enjoyable than anything the War Within had to offer. I was really disappointed to see this level of effort put into the new events. If you're going to take the time to create something, make it something that people actually want to do. What a waste of your and our time otherwise. But what wasn't a waste of time for me this expansion, surprisingly, was dungeons. This expansion, I did every dungeon as all 3 roles. As a tank and healer, I ran mid-level keys at most, but I primarily played DPS on my warrior and was able to get every dungeon done at least a 10. In Season 1, I had a Mythic Plus rating of 2624, and the highest keys I timed were 10s. In Season 2, my rating was 2695, and the highest key I timed was a 12 Rookery. And in Season 3, my rating was 2419, and my highest keys were again just 10s. Overall, the dungeons from this expansion I enjoyed. There are some dungeons like Priory or Dark Flame Cleft that I wasn't excited to run, but they weren't terrible. Priory looks beautiful, but gave me so much anxiety, especially when I would tank or heal. It's just a stressful dungeon. City of Threads or Arakara are ones that I don't hate, they're just difficult, so it's stressful going through them as well. I don't know why, but the last boss in Arakara, I just could not figure out. I would constantly die. And if I somehow managed not to die, I would be doing less damage than the healer. Rookery, Floodgate, and Stone Vault were dungeons I absolutely loved. They're just really fun, and I enjoyed running them, which is rare because usually by the end of an expansion, I hate every single dungeon. Kind of like the miscellaneous dungeons we had in each dungeon pool this expansion, I did not like most of them. Outside of Grim Batol, they were all from BFA or Shadowlands, which just no. Mist of Tarnoscythe in particular is possibly my least favorite dungeon of all time ever. I loathe that dungeon more and more as it goes on. It just absolutely sucks ass, and I hope we never see it again. Necrotic Wake was always frustrating for me just due to how tight the timer was. I'd always feel like we had plenty of time left, but by the time we got to the Meat Hook boss, it just took like 13 wipes to kill it, and then the key would disband. Motherlode was actually one that I grew to enjoy. I'm not really sure why, because I didn't like it in BFA, but this time around it wasn't too bad. And funny enough, Grim Batol was probably my favorite non-War Within dungeon in the seasonal pools this expansion. I only ran it a handful of times, but it was difficult, and it was a dungeon I hadn't seen in a long time, and I personally found it fun. The affixes this expansion were overall fine. I know that I really enjoyed how simple some of them were to deal with, like the one where an orb rotates around you and other people need to soak it. It's simple, and you can just run your orb into someone else if they don't want to do mechanics. Or the one where like 10 mobs spawn and you just need to stun them or knock them back. I just like the simplicity of these. This was the first expansion where I actually enjoyed doing Mythic Plus for the most part, and I participated in it throughout the entirety of the expansion, and I did more keys than was just minimally required for me to get a 2K rating. In the War Within, Mythic Plus was a fun way to spend a couple of hours, and it gave me that feeling of progression that I've been missing since I stopped raiding. Speaking of raids, as has been the case for a few expansions now, I joined in on my guild's friends and family raids. They're cutting edge guilds, so there's not really a lot of progression I was in on. On my warrior, I did all the raids on heroic and got ahead of the curve. In Season 2 in particular, I actually spent a bit of time doing some heroic progression with the guild on the later bosses in Undermine. And I actually really enjoyed progressing on One-Armed Bandit, Mugsy, and Gallywix. It was just fun slowly learning more of the fights and eventually trying to have everyone utilize what we've learned over the last few hours to successfully have a 10-minute pull. If I could capture that specific feeling with every raid cycle, I would love raiding progressively. As far as raid achievements go, the guild and I completed all of them except one of the non-meta achievements in Undermine. On my tank and healer, I did all the bosses in the first 2 raids in LFR only. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with them in there. But as far as my enjoyment of the raids go, I love them. Similar to dungeons, this is the first time in a while, maybe ever, where at the end of an expansion, I'm not thinking of a particular raid and just groaning. I think my ranking of the raids would probably be in the reverse order that they were released, so my favorite is Manaforge, then Undermine, then D.R.I.V.E. I've talked before about my love for ethereals and the Void and WoW, so Manaforge feels like it was literally created specifically for me. I enjoyed all the fights in here, but I think Dementius is my favorite. That fight, just to watch it, is beautiful, but being a part of it is so much fun. Soul Hunters is one fight I enjoyed specifically during the meta achievement for it because you have to equip an item that turns your screen black and all you see is the red outlines of the bosses for a minute. That was so much fun, and just reading the comments in Wowhead, I was excited to do it, but then actually playing through it, I had so much fun with that, and I honestly wish the achievement was to do that fight like that the entire time. It was so good. Then in Undermine, I think my entire guild and I almost immediately said that this was one of the best raids that Blizzard has ever made. It's so good, and the fights, again, are so much fun. The back half, though, when you get into the Galagio, is just absolutely perfect. To be honest, I was more interested in walking around and just taking in the incredible attention to detail they put in this raid than I was pulling more bosses. The little things like the slide into the money pit are so silly but created such fun memories. My entire guild would get giddy with excitement whenever someone new would come into the raid and they didn't know about that slide. We would all eagerly clear that trash and watch them go down like proud parents. My favorite fights in this raid were Sprocketmonger, Mugsy, and Gallywix. Sprocketmonger is absolute chaos in the best way possible. I've never smiled more running 7 FPS than I did during that fight. There's just so much going on, so much for everyone to do, and it was just stupid in the nicest way. It's hectic as all hell, and honestly, maybe one of my favorite boss fights ever. Mugsy isn't anything crazy, but just going back to when we're progressing on it, it really made me appreciate the fight. It slowly ramps up the further into it you get, and by the end of it, you're literally just holding on to your assless chaps, hoping you have at least one person alive to finish the boss. I'm definitely going to look back fondly on this fight, specifically the one night we got to like 5% by the end of the raid night, and ended up staying up another like 3 hours just to not kill it. Nerebar Palace is probably my least favorite of the 3. I don't dislike it, but I'm kind of neutral on it. Rashanan was probably my favorite of the entire raid. Echoing a lot of what I've talked about in the previous 2 raids, specifically with Sprocketmonger, I love a little bit of chaos in my raid bosses. And Rashanan was a lot of fun with all the different stuff going on that you had to avoid. As a melee, it wasn't the greatest thing, having to constantly run around, but the other mechanics made up for that. Something else I really enjoyed this expansion was PvP, which I did all of on my Marksman Hunter. This is the most time I've spent PvPing in a while, and there were some weekends where I would literally just be queuing Battlegrounds the entire time. I'm not a competitive PvPer though, so I don't have any comments about arena or balancing or anything like that, just my general experience. Each season I was able to get my Hunter fully in Conquest gear, and I did every PvP achievement in the War Within, including every achievement for the new Battleground D.R.I.V.E Ravine, which I quite enjoyed. I like the layout of the Battleground because I think most of us know that a lot of pugs like to just fight in mid away from the objective. D.R.I.V.E kind of promotes fighting in mid because the crystal is in mid, while also the 2 carts circle around mid for like 90 seconds each. I saw so many times, even the most tunnel vision players eventually back up under the cart so they could fight on it. The games were quick, and action seemed never ending. I think the only thing I really want to talk about in terms of PvP is how frustrating it can be to try and out-damage a healer. My favorite D.R.I.V.E games were when both teams had 1 healer, because if any team had 2, almost no one ever died, which is super frustrating. Even with 1 healer it could suck, but eventually you could chain just enough CC and interrupts to stop them. But I just think healing is kind of insane. I would get so mad seeing a healer get in the single-digit % health range, then suddenly go back up to full through some instant cast thing. There was actually this one time in Isle of Dorn where myself and 7 other players chased an evoker halfway across the map trying to kill him, and we just couldn't. Especially one-on-one sometimes. There would just be battlegrounds where I'd be the only person damaging a healer, and I just straight up could not kill them. It's not fun, it's frustrating, and I think there's something wrong there. I just don't know enough about PvP to know exactly what the solution is, but that sucked. There are 2 more things I want to touch on before I go to my final thoughts on the expansion. The first is the drive system. I think this launched at the wrong time. It's a fast ground mount that was kind of fun to ride, but Undermine is quite possibly the worst zone you could have released it in. You can't drive straight for more than like 8 seconds without hitting something. Blizzard did not set this system up to succeed the same way that they did dragon riding in Dragonflight. Because there they gave us vast open areas to fly in and tall mountains to nosedive from for vigor. Imagine if dragon riding was released but only worked in Naxxramas. That would have been a misguided way to show the new system in the best light, and people would obviously never really get to fully enjoy it. But even outside of when and where it was released, the bumper car effect, when you hit something, spikes my blood pressure. It's so annoying, losing all of my momentum and then being shoved backwards slowly, having to slowly rev up and get back up to speed. I think the drive system could potentially work. I'd rather it not be a vehicle action bar, but something like how skywriting works now, so if I want, I can dismount by charging or whirlwinding an enemy. I'd rather have a system like the skywriting charges work now for speeding up, or like give us a 250% movement speed increase button on a 20-second timer or something. And then lastly, if Drive does come back, just no bumper cars, please. And then the last thing I want to touch on are visions. Of all the awful decisions Blizzard has ever made, Underpin is number 1, and Visions may be number 2. I don't know who pitched this being brought back, but when I saw the announcement, I groaned so hard. Visions suck. There is absolutely nothing fun about them. And I would know because I've done all the achievements for the original and the ones in the War Within. With delves or challenge modes or Mythic Plus or even Brawler's Guild, I guess for some people, there's an increasing difficulty that you can progress in. Visions not only have an increasing difficulty, but it's artificially inflated with these asinine, frustrating, unfun affixes, I guess you can call them, like having less sanity and also losing more sanity from sanity affecting abilities. There's really nothing more I can say about the content itself other than it sucked unwashed monkey ass. But what made me even more frustrated with Visions is that they were pretty much forgotten about as soon as 11.2 came out. There were a handful of times where I'd fly by the NPC and go, oh yeah, I forgot about Visions. There was no reason really to go do them like the Otherworld content after a while. On top of that, we got these enchants that came out with Visions that everyone was super excited for, only for them to be absolutely useless, get buffed a bit so they're just useless instead of absolutely useless, and then you just can't use the enchant anymore in the next patch. What was the point of anything in 11.1.5? The entire idea around Visions was just a big turnoff and really only served as an annoyance more than anything else. So I want to move into my conclusion here. In my Dragonflight review, I said that it was great, but I hoped that I could come back here in 2 years and say that the War Within was even better. Was it? No. But it was still pretty good. There were a lot of great things done to make the game better for solo players and casual players. From that standpoint, I don't think WoW has ever been better. I hoped that the War Within would continue in the footsteps of Dragonflight, and I think that it did. So as a casual, mostly solo player who just wants to collect stuff and feel like I'm progressing my character without dumping hundreds of hours into it, and who doesn't want silly grinds like artifact power, anima, the War Within checks off all the boxes for me to consider it a good expansion. I think for me to have considered it great though, it would have had to have less things in the game that felt like Blizzard wanted to say they did something when all they really did was half-ass it. The effort put into things like Nightfall, Awakening the Machine, World Soul Memories, and the Drive system were very noticeable and unappreciated. Not all of these may be the end of the world if Blizzard underdelivers, but I do worry if this is what we can expect moving forward, because I'd rather have fewer things to do than the things that we can do still needing more time in the oven. But for me, I got the full experience with this expansion. I did just about everything you could do. I got almost every single achievement you could get and participated in every bit of content it had to offer. And for the most part, I'd say I had a lot of fun doing it. In Midnight, I'd like Blizzard to continue their focus on solo and casual content, but do it like they mean it. Give us fun stuff to do and we'll love doing it. Whatever they did in the War Within with dungeons and raids, keep that up because again, for the most part, I had a ton of fun in them. I talked earlier about how my favorite things in WoW are Ethereals and the Void, and Midnight is all about that life. From a visual perspective, Midnight has the potential to be the expansion I spend the most time in during and after. From a content perspective, I think I have enough faith in Blizzard to see what they come up with. As I've done for the last few expansions, I'm going into Midnight relatively blind. I haven't played the beta, PTR, watched any videos, or read much news about Midnight at all. I want to experience it for the first time when I play it. I seem to love saying this in all my review videos, but I hope that in 2 years' time, I'm making my Midnight review talking about how it was perfect. I want to say that as a casual player, I loved having the freedom to log on whenever I wanted and do whatever I wanted without stupid, tedious grinds. I want to say that the dungeons, raids, world events, prey system, delves, PvP, and whatever else just kept me happily engaged. I want to say that I have petabytes worth of screenshots from every zone. I want to say that I felt like this expansion was made for me specifically. But all of that hardly ever happens, so more realistically, in 2 years, I just want to be able to say that I'm really gonna miss Midnight, just like I miss Dragonflight. Speaking of Midnight, if you've pre-ordered, tonight is the night. I say this every expansion, but this is my absolute favorite time of any expansion cycle. Everyone experiencing a new era of WoW together, all the new content and collectibles and achievements. Before the weekly grinds for delves and Mythic Plus start, I love this first week of school vibe. I'm happy to be a part of it again, and I love the buggy mess that launch week is, and I love being able to witness it with all of you. If you haven't pre-ordered, I hope this weekend is quick and easy and you're joining us at midnight as soon as possible. Let me know what your plans are for launch week. Did you take time off of work? What's your expansion ritual? Are you even looking forward to the expansion? And what about the War Within? What'd you think of it? Did it live up to your expectations or fall short of them? Anything and everything, I'd love to hear about what you have to say in the comments. If you like this video or any others I've made, make sure to subscribe because there's always more coming. Unless I die, which would make me a liar and would be really awkward. But if you really liked it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and check out my Dragonflight review video from 2024 to hear exactly what I loved so much about it. You can click that video that's on screen now. Thanks for watching. I love you lots. Enjoy midnight. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.